Okay, Tuesday edition of the After Show. Got Wink of Justice with a Wink over here on the East Coast.
And Justice on the west coast of the contiguous United States of America. Here's Red Sky at Morning Tuesdays. The refraction of light on the horizon portends something is a-brewing.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. There's a red sky in someone's morning somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
Well, Wink, how are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. It is 59 degrees here in New York, 21, and this is a high for the day. It's heading downward from here. So we're going into the low 50s, maybe the high 40s later today. But so it's one of those crazy days where you start off at the high and go downward. Reminder, get in the chat. Just go to netrootsradio.com. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side of the bottom of the page, there is a link to the chat. So click that. Join us there.
And on the leftish of the chat room link there at the bottom of the homepage are the Contribute Donate buttons. So thank you for your generosity. I remind folks because, well, Soros checks are not coming.
Yeah.
I'm almost convinced that we are not going to get those Soros checks.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
There's only two things I hope for in life. That my writing will find an audience after I'm dead.
There you go.
And the Soros checks will come in the mail before I'm dead.
Yeah.
Those are the two things I hope for.
That's all.
Keeps me going.
Yep.
Keeps me, nose to the grindstone.
There you go.
All right. Here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it is currently, 46 degrees. We're going to go up to 83 today,
Wow.
Week.
Yep.
And then a low ostensibly tonight of 50. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, it's given me a little bit of it's not a summer cold. Maybe an Indian summer cold? I don't know. I got something.
Yeah.
It's sinus oriented, which is bothersome to me because, it makes my head ache and pressure underneath my eyebrows. Starting to break up a little bit, but that's a little too much TMI. So too much information, too much TMI. Can you have too much information? I think you can.
Yeah.
Okay, so tonight we're, like I said, ostensibly have a low of 50, and the wind is out of the southwest, barely negligible. At barely negligible? Well, less than 2 miles an hour. So there you go. All right, let's see now. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's weather stations that they have purchased, and these people live around the world. London is 66 and overcast. Paris is 64 and overcast. Rome is 69 and clear. Kiev is 39 and overcast. Kabul, 68 and clear. Hong Kong, 67 and clear. Tokyo, 57 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 67 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California, 65 and clear. And New York is 74 and overcast. There is a weather advisory. I wonder if it'll allow me to find out what that weather advisory is.
Yeah.
It just didn't. Here, let me try to find out again.
Yeah.
It won't do it. Why are you doing that to me? How dare they? I'm sorry. I just, there's a little exclamation point for a weather advisory, and I click on the thing, and it doesn't take me to that page. So I don't know. All right, well, something's happened in New York. We don't know, but it is right now not bad weather, 74 and overcast.
Yeah, not bad at all.
All right, well, that is weather from around the world brought to you by people's weather stations, and they live around the world.
There you go.
Well, Trump has been spending hours rage tweeting against Bob Corker today. I don't know. Guy's a busy guy, pretty busy. I mean, insult the widow of a hero, soldier hero. Just do that. Call her a liar. I love the explanations, the defense.
Yeah.
I believe it was Costas, is that his name? Writes for, I believe, the Washington Post and follows Trump. He was asked last night on one of the MSNBC shows if he was shocked by Trump's behavior towards this widow. And he said, no, this is Trump being Trump. He is unconventional. He doesn't do things that normal politicians would do. And I would add, he doesn't do things normal people would do.
Yeah.
So, right wing is attacking Maisha Johnson, the widow. Death threats week. Death threats to a 6-month pregnant widow of a war hero. And they call themselves Americans? I'll just make an assessment. I think this might fall under the aegis of, in this reporter's opinion, but opinions can be predicated upon fact, can they not? If you are attacking Maisha Evans, I think that means you're a racist. Unbelievable. Yeah, he's not your normal politician. He does things normal people would never do. And apparently that is an attribute that is positive in that world. No, it's not shocking that he is what he is. I'll tell you what is shocking, that we're putting up with it. Okay, enough of that editorializing. We better get on with it because we do this all the time. There's always more on this show, and we give so much more.
Yeah.
It really is true. I don't know. I'll tell you the thing that bugs me the most. Trump is giving golfing a bad name.
Hey, yes.
It kind of bugs me because, I actually like golf.
Yeah, I do as well. I never get a chance to play.
It's
nice.
It's a great event to watch on TV and take a nap.
Yep. Yeah, that's that too. Yep.
And then you go out there and try to do what those people do, and you realize, wow, this is pretty much of a skilled game.
Yeah, it is.
And this guy's making it like, who wants to ever go golfing again?
Exactly.
Well, these are the issues that we will be attending to today, and they are. Excuse me, my nose is in that cold stage where you kind of get stuffed up. So I apologize. Here, let me have my handkerchief nearby so I can dab.
There you go.
Okay, Fox News criticized Hillary Clinton for cursing on a British adult talk show. How dare she? She's so crass, Wink. So uncivilized. But, calling the widow of a war hero a liar, that is just perfectly fine and good company, isn't it? 2 followers of renegade Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy pled guilty over the armed 2014 standoff. I thought they were going to try to do the jury nullification thing again,
Right.
Yeah, they had a free speech right to point guns at federal officers. When you're white. And James O'Keefe wants you to think that he's a journalist, but his overwhelming dishonesty proves otherwise. A journalist. I don't know. Maybe in the original German.
Yeah. Something like that, yeah.
Well, it is Tuesday, and this is the day that we visit with Chris Reeves. Always affectionately known as Tom Servo 433 around here.
Yep.
And we're going to have a discussion on the Kansas Department of Children and Family Services Secretary declaring that the state often finds children missing in their care. Where do we put that kid? Jeez. Home alone?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see how fake news and gossip spreads from the DNC. We need to be aware what's going on here. And he's got some inside baseball on this, by the way.
There you go.
And because of that, we're going to get a recap of the DNC fall meeting. And a new work committee has just been organized, too. It's exciting. All that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Co's community calendar and more on the after show with that ever so fine fellow over there on the East Coast, and his name is Wink, and this guy back over here on the West Coast. My name is Justice, and we do this 5 days a week for an hour-ish in this particular specific and ever peculiar tear in the fabric of space-time, because who loves you, baby? All right. Was watching Science Channel last night. Hey, they're going to bring back never mind. They're going to bring back this show that I liked all of a sudden because I had very little sleep last night because I took my mom into her overnight sleep test.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was up all night making sure that I'd get up to be able to go get her and come back here and be able to do the show.
Yeah. You never sleep, I know.
I
hate it.
Yes. But I was watching the Science Channel, and regardless about this show that's coming back, and it'll come to me when the show's over, and then I'll feel like, jeez, am I that old? But a special on Devil Stars, Killer Stars, and it's very exciting. Actually, there's a kind of star called a blue giant. Now, of course, what we know in terms of red and blue in space, it's like when something's moving away or coming at us. But this has a blue light because it is so god-awful hot. Isn't that interesting? Of course, they say they live a very fast, hot, and short life. Just a measly 10 million years.
Yeah.
Short. Of course, our guy is what, for 4 billion years or so. So, it adds up.
Oh, yeah.
But that was quite exciting because to be able to perceive these stars, we're talking not, what is it? Andromeda is like 200 million light years away. So what we see of the formation of Andromeda happened 200 million years ago.
Right.
And that seems pretty far away. But these blue giants are so far back in time. We're talking hundreds of billions of light years away. Yep. So, of course, the flat earthers don't believe any of that. And then, of course, then they make a mistake where they say that they have followers all around the globe. Now, how can a flat earther have followers all around the globe? If the earth is flat. I don't get it.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. See what happens? We're out of the age of enlightenment, and we're, following into the precipitous dark age. The only reason they called it the Dark Ages is ostensibly, no new insights or inventions had occurred. It was, the epitome of anti-intellectualism, the loss of education, reason, rational inquiry. That's not entirely true, of course, but it was in reaction to, few world cultures coming together and matching notes. And when you want to have, control over your population, maybe you don't want them to know, what the hell is really going on. Interesting. I'm talking about that if a common person, like somebody just, working, a guild person, making cloth, say, warp and woof, right? If they had a book, they could be put to death because they weren't allowed to have books. Only certain members of the aristocracy, not all of the aristocracy, mind you, but certain elements of the aristocracy could have a book. It's almost like there's people today who want to go back to those good old times. Yeah. All right. So, of course, you got Bill O'Reilly over there at Fox with his loofah and his falafel stuff, you know. And he's writing a children's book. Just wrap your brains around that one. So, I don't know. He's a fairly crass fellow, you know. We've seen the outtakes of him going off. So it's delicious when somebody like Fox is like complaining because Hillary Clinton said shit. This is Harriet Sinclair from Newsweek. Fox News slammed Hillary Clinton for using a bad word during her interview with BBC's The Graham Norton Show. Or did they say Graham? Graham. The former presidential candidate appeared on the show last Friday as she toured the UK promoting her book, What Happened, and told host Graham Norton a story about former George W. Bush's reaction to Donald Trump's inauguration speech. It was reported that Bush said it ends, as it ends, says, "That was some weird shit," she said on the show. And he did. He said that. And it was, Norton replied in a conversation that appears to have been deemed inappropriate by Fox News, despite being on a show intended for mature audiences. What about the kids, Wink? Yeah, that's what I'm asking. If you got Bill O'Reilly writing books for kids and he just paid out $32 million to one woman, that's out of a $46 million settlement, Wink. The $32 million went to one gal.
Right.
What did he do? I mean, wrongful death suits are, you know, you're lucky if you get $5 million for that.
Must be like
$10,000
for groping a butt or something. I don't know. It must be.
And he's writing a children's book.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that Fox News is upset because children might hear the word shit.
Yeah.
But they have no problem with Bill O'Reilly writing a book for children. Oh, God. Okay, the Democrat described Trump's speech as a cry from a white nationalist gut, but nonetheless, the fact that she said the word shit was held up by the news channel for scrutiny. Admitting she had really tried to get out of going to the inauguration, Clinton said, "We thought, okay, maybe others aren't going, so we called the Bushes, and the elder Bushes were in the hospital," which I think was legitimate. So when we called the younger Bushes, they said, "Yeah, we're going." Clinton laughingly said, adding that she and her husband, former President Bill Clinton, felt that they had to attend to. Damn. They could have said they were just in the hospital. That's what I would have done. Sorry, got some tests to go. Can't get out of them.
Yeah.
I was sitting next to G.W. Bush, and Bill was on my other side. We were listening to this really dark, divisive speech that I describe as a cry from the white nationalist gut. You know, the part where he says, "This American carnage must stop here," and rah, 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 rah. Black people are destroying America, and their brown fellow travelers are destroying everything that we hold dear.
Yeah.
Remember that? I was so disappointed, Clinton continued, really so sad that it wasn't an outreach. It was a narrowing and a hammering of what he had said before. And reporting on news that Clinton told the chat show host that she and her husband just wished they could ditch the inauguration, Fox News commented that she even let out a curse word as she discussed Trump's speech in a headline that has been described as odd by a number of news outlets. The article made no mention of why it was newsworthy that an adult woman retold a story with an expletive on a late-night show instead of simply pointing out the former presidential hopeful swearing. Yep. Well, you know, they sit around saying, okay, it's okay if you're a Republican. What can we attack them with next? Because these are the same people that are, like, you know, complaining about Hillary using the S word. who used some very vile language that described anatomy when talking about Hillary. Huh. Interesting. Interesting. All right. Well, she's their Goldstein. Goldstein was the eternal evil person in 1984 that the government always plastered the photograph and billboards of so people would know who to hate.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. She is the right wing's Goldstein. Okay, well, sometimes some good comes out of the world, though we'll find out how good it is. This is an article out of Reuters by Stephen Gorman in Los Angeles. Two supporters of renegade Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy each pleaded guilty on Monday, that was yesterday, to obstructing a U.S. court order for their role in a 2014 showdown between armed militia members and federal agents who had seized Bundy's cattle. Remember when black people went out in the middle of the street unarmed to, put up their hands and say, I can't breathe. Right? Remember that? And the constabulary brought out tanks and gas and the National Guard. Remember that? Well, the reason they did that is because they can get away with it because those people that they're terrorizing will not have the means to fight back. And if they do, they're dead. But get some white nationalist racists. I got to tell you, I read this article where the military, they did a survey of active military right now a week. And over 70% say that white nationalism is a bigger threat to the country. Domestic white nationalism is a bigger threat to the United States than ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the theater that they're in overseas. So there is some pushback. A Navy commander said, well, you know that there is a difference between white nationalists and racists, don't you? There is no difference between a white nationalist and a racist. One and the same. And that's why there is civilian control over the military, because you got some dimwits that's a Navy commander, and he thinks that white nationalism and racism is different. I'm sorry if I'm not genuflecting to the archangel of, that protects the military or whatever. The military is a needed aspect of our form of government, indeed. But I would say not any more important than, the Peace Corps. If I had my druthers week, everybody's got to do public service. You either do a stint in the military, maybe people should at least do, go through boot camp.
Yep.
Maybe put in a support area somewhere. But regardless, they still need to go out and do civilian stuff too.
Oh yeah. Germany, it's 18 months mandatory.
There you go. There you go. You either go in a military venture, or they put you out cutting trails, or repairing roads, or putting roofs on schools, or civilian duty.
Yep. Not bad.
So that would be that's if I had my druthers, that's what we would do. Short of that, I presented myself for the draft. I got a high lottery number, so they didn't drag my ass in. Got to go.
Yep.
But I didn't shirk my responsibility like somebody like this guy Trump whining about bone spurs. By the time that I presented myself for the draft, I'd already had a major shoulder reconstruction. I was ready for my first of 4 knee surgeries.
Yeah, they wouldn't have taken you either, chances are.
Probably not. I was told that, if I had my own personal doctor on the sidelines like we did in football, they might. But they don't supply that for you.
Right.
That's what they told me. When I told them, well, put me in communications or,
There you go.
overseas somewhere, somewhere. But I still got a high enough lottery number. So short of actually then joining the military, I did other things like volunteering in the community, worked for an NGO and dug water wells for schools. And at least on a psychological level, it appeased that sense that one doesn't shirk their responsibility to their nation.
Right.
So when I hear right-wingers talk about how patriotic they are, I ask them, well, were you ever in the military? What did you do? And when you were not in the military, you never went to the military, what did you do? So I don't know. They talk about supporting the troops. If it wasn't for the liberals, we wouldn't have the programs that we have for returning troops. It's always the liberals that try to get the back pay paid to the troops. What is it about conservatives, Like your 401k week. You were expecting a certain amount, and now you're reaching that point. They're going to say, oh, no, sorry. You get less.
Exactly. Yep.
Silly rabbit.
Yeah. Thanks for playing.
Well, these Bundy characters, Eric J. Parker, age 34, O. Scott Drexler, age 47, both from Idaho. Now, let's be clear about Idaho, because Idaho, a lot of people are recognizing that there's a lot of Californians moving into Idaho who are white nationalists. And you need to understand how, Western movement occurred in the United States. Really, it's no secret. All the crazies from America went to California. Okay? We've got to be, people that otherwise they wouldn't have come. Pushed out, wanted to find a new life, start a new life. So we got a lot of, sketchy characters that came across the continent. They ended up in California. You let that fester and stew and distill, and then you get that potent concoction, and those people moved to Idaho. I'm just giving you a little thumbnail sketch about Western expansion. Yeah, just so. Okay, in this reporter's opinion. Most of it is true. So these guys come from Idaho. They were scheduled to be sentenced on February 2nd of 2018. In a statement, the FBI released announcing the guilty pleas. The two men accused of threatening law enforcement officers with guns were originally tried on several more serious charges for which they faced at least 57 years each in prison if convicted. Defense lawyers argue that the two men, along with four co-defendants, were just exercising constitutionally protected rights to assemble and bear arms, casting the showdown as a patriotic act of civil disobedience against government overreach. Remember in Pennsylvania when the MOVE organization, this black organization, they had some row houses, in Philly? And they were exercising their constitutional secured rights to, civil disobedience and to redress their government and bear arms. Remember that? Remember what happened to them, Link? I'll remind you.
Yeah, sorry.
The Philadelphia police then decided, well, we'll use the helicopters that we got now, and we'll drop some incendiary bombs on these row houses, and we'll kill hundreds of black people, women, men, and children. And when they try to get out of the burning building, we'll fire on them with our weaponry to drive them back inside, and we'll keep the fire department from putting out the fires. And that was brought up, not in the court, but that was brought up to show the hypocrisy. Go confiscate some white guy's cattle because he's not paying his fees, grazing fees, and he's lost in court over the last 15 years. But you got some white guys with weaponry, and oh no, we got to back down on that. But they have no problem incinerating women, children, and men in a firestorm in row houses in Philadelphia back in the day. It wasn't that far back in the day, by the way,
Right.
during Reagan's time, just so you know. Okay, let's see. Bundy and others who participated in the confrontation, including 4 of his sons, were later charged with conspiracy, assault, and other offenses. The elder Bundy sons, Eamon and Ryan Bundy, and a third rancher or supporter face trial next week. And of course, the 2 Bundy brothers and 5 other people were acquitted in a separate federal court in Portland last October over conspiracy charges stemming from an armed takeover of a U.S. wildlife center in Oregon in 2016. And that's what I mean by jury nullification. The defense prevailed, saying we can't get a fair trial with a jury pool in Portland. We have to extend it to, places rural Oregon, so that we get enough people who think that the United States needs to be broken up and they want to secede from it on the jury pool. People who agree that it's okay to take up arms against the U.S. government as a constitutionally protected right of civil disobedience. And they did. You get usually a jury of your peers from the district that you're in. But in this case, they decided to draw from the most rural, white supremacist, racist parts of Oregon for the jury pool. How'd that work out? Almost kind of like when Rajneesh came and was taking over little towns in Central Oregon and poisoning people at the local Sizzler salad bar so that they could take over government. Yeah, that happened here too. So, there is precedent, Now, I have a particular hate for James O'Keefe because I was working with Acorn in Oakland. Though, they're known for voter registration, but you know what they started as? Going after predatory loans. These fraudsters during the housing bubble who are going after black grandmas and great grandmas and saying, hey, take out a loan, use your house as collateral, and you'll be able to pay off those bills that you wanted to pay off. And the terms were so bad that they would lose their homes, foreclosed on, kicked out. I mean, it's just horrendous. So Acorn was set up to fight against that and counsel people not to take these predatory loans and how to be able to pay their bills and their mortgages without taking out those predatory loans. And that got the predatory loan market in Oakland really mad, or in the Bay Area. I used to see that. So we were doing, we were volunteering and doing construction and such for them. But they're mostly on the national level known for their get out the vote drives. So, of course, James O'Keefe wants to pass himself off as an investigative journalist, and that ostensibly will then give him succour to go out and actually harass, stalk, and malign people under the guise of a free press. So a little bit different than the way 60 Minutes did it, though that's the model that he purports that he's following under. But what are some of the things that he did? Well, he absolutely lied about Acorn. Of course, people had to move quick because there were some black people involved here, and, you never know what might happen there. I mean, blackmail on blackmail crime is just so amazing. They're killing themselves in bushels.
Yeah.
Gorka is on local Sinclair broadcasting stations with that little meme lately. That's why I bring it up. As an aside, you know what? We should print up some like protest posters so that at least I could go down to the local Sinclair broadcasting stations with a sign that says, "This is Sinclair Broadcasting. It's not CBS."
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, that's what they've done. They're buying up these little affiliates who have, the CBS, NBC, ABC moniker.
Right.
Because, they're doing that national feed, but then on the local feed, you get Sebastian Gorka.
It never ends.
It never, ever ends. Well, there's not much more to say about O'Keefe. I mean, remember when he said that like Muslims were coming across the Mexican border, and he had proof because they found, I guess, like a Quran wrapped up in some shawls or whatever, and it turned out not to be a Quran, and the fabric weren't shawls. I mean, it's just crazy stuff. And then he put on a mask to make it look like he was Osama bin Laden along the Rio Grande. And he did this like video of Osama trying to get across the Rio Grande. I mean, him dressed up as Osama. It's just, I mean, it was like crazy stuff. But there's Republicans in Congress who looked at that video and decided, wow, we gotta spend some money to make sure that Osama's not coming across the Rio Grande. Look at that.
Yeah.
So links are all provided, of course, in the show notes. So check those out. Let's get to our Jim Hightower break. We'll come back, go through the Connect Unite Act Daily Coast Community Calendar. We have to get a hold of Chris. Oh my God.
Yep.
All right. All right. You're listening to the After Show on Networks Radio with Wink of Justice, and we will be right back.
So President Trump makes what was to be a condolence phone call to a young widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson, one of 4 American soldiers killed on a military patrol in Niger. And all of a sudden, the White House explodes in yet another political conflagration and a new burst of presidential lies. Was Trump disrespectful to the widow by not referring to her dead husband by name, but as your guy, then declaring that Sergeant Johnson, quote, knew what he was signing up for? She and 2 witnesses to the call say yes. Trump and his White House PR flacks issued a furious string of no. But rather than simply let it go at no, Trump couldn't resist, 1, patting himself on the back, and 2, politicizing the whole exchange. He bragged that he has called the family of every soldier killed since he's been commander-in-chief. Turns out the chief lied about that. Many grieving families got no call at all from him. Then he took a cheap shot at Obama and other former presidents, declaring that most of them didn't call any families of dead soldiers. Another lie, for they did, in fact, make calls. But wait a minute. Niger? While most media outlets have played this brouhaha as a she-said, he-said story, shouldn't we be asking Trump the big question? What the hell are our military forces doing in Niger? To the public's complete surprise, we suddenly learned that the U.S. has soldiers dying there. Why? What is our national interest there that warrants spending American lives and money? This is Jim Hightower saying Trump and his GOP Congress are throwing money at the Pentagon, your and my money, demanding a massive $700 billion military budget. For what? Here's another shocker for you. The Pentagon has some 200,000 U.S. troops deployed in 177 countries. Who knew? And again, why?
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Okay, we're back.
And indeed, we are back, and thank you for sticking with us. This is the After Show with Wink and Justice. Justice here along the banks of the Rogue River on the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the West Coast. Wink is in upstate New York, 21 on the East Coast. Chris Reeves, I think, is back home in the vast plains of the Midwest. And our crew are the ethereal creatures who reside in the cloud whose advanced intergalactic technical abilities allow Networks Radio to span the globe, the solar system, out past the Oort cloud, out past those giant blue stars, hundreds of billions thousands of light years away and beyond. Sure.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems hyperbole doesn't have to be based upon any kind of facts, and so the only way to make it in today's new Agogo society is to lie big.
Yeah, you don't need science or anything like that.
Okay. Sounds Teutonic, but it seems to be working for some people. We got to get rid of them. Okay, I'm going to go through this really quick. Eric Lewis facilitated today's calendar diary, and he does bring up the fake Russian troll farms that various members of our media, and we should be clear, I mean, a lot of us, in the alternative media could get caught up in it and did. And we'll speak a little bit about how fake news spreads with Chris.
Yeah.
But do go to the diary. Links are provided, and we'll go through the events tomorrow since we're a bit behind today. So that is your Connect Unite Act Daily Coast Community Calendar for the 24th of October of 2017. And Chris, sorry, I took my mom to one of those overnight sleep tests. And of course, that meant that I didn't get to sleep very much because I was worried,
You're okay.
So sorry for spacing and getting here a little bit late. But let's start off with the story of the Kansas Department Children and Family Services Secretary. Are people this droll? I mean, is this meant in a good way? That they discover missing children all the time? I mean, that to me is a scary admission.
It is a scary admission, considering everything else that has gone on in that department. From the hiring of unqualified staff to the rise in abuse to kids found kids murdered. I mean, the one fed to a pig. I mean, we're just kind of on a roll in Kansas DCF with, anything goes and they have no control. Well, the story broke that they had lost track of more than 70 kids. They have no idea where they are, and that were in the foster care system. Well, her answer is, look, a lot of these were older kids. They ran off home to their parents. Well, if you know that, then you didn't lose track of them. You know where they went. But she doesn't know that. In fact, nobody knows because they didn't follow back up to have a report say, well, they ran off back home. Nothing. There's just no report of anything to know where any of these people went. And in the end, Phyllis Gilmore's basic answer was tough.
Right.
Her basic answer was tough, too bad. The state is not a parent. Well,
yeah, you are.
You'll hear this. Oh, that's okay. You'll hear a lot from Republicans who will tell you things like, "Oh, the state is not a parent. The state shouldn't be doing whatever." Blah 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 blah. There's a big problem with that argument. Nobody is asking the state to be a parent. Absolutely nobody. But the one thing that we are asking the state to do is to enforce the law, which is, last I checked, something that they are specifically and exclusively empowered to do. It's not like the rest of us can run around and enforce the law.
Chris,
saying.
Chris, can I ask you? I need to ask a question. Because in these situations, when children are put into the system as such, I thought the legal term was ward or guardian of the state. Does that terminology not exist in Kansas?
Well, it's the way in which they define it differently in some states, but most people are familiar with that terminology. That is common terminology. That's not, outlandish or abnormal. That's kind of the way a lot of people think about it. That's fine. The state of Kansas just kind of looks at it like random kids wandering around that we somehow do something with now and again. And they tend to act that way. They behave as though their role in this is super limited. And, if things go wrong, they go wrong. Well, we're at a point where finally Democrats, specifically two of them, Jim Ward and Laura Kelly, have been for some time calling for major changes within the department because their basic claim is, look, there has to be some level of accountability, which is interesting because Republicans will scream about accountability all day long, against Democrats over absolutely nothing,
right.
Fake email scandals, whatever. But when kids are dead or lost and you say there has to be some accountability here, all of a sudden they go nuts and they're frustrated that you're doing that and you're politicizing a problem. Well, no, we're asking simply, for some accountability. Who lost these kids? Why are these kids not, where they're supposed to be? Why are these kids, in the trouble that they're in when the state was supposed to be working to make sure these things did not happen? And that seems like the absolute least we could expect from the state government. But what do I know,
I tend to not pay much attention to news stories that have this weird prurient appeal to basic fears or prejudices. And one constant one that I used to hear from the time I had my now what is he 40-year-old son, when he was a little guy, was child abduction. So I used to, this is like just blown out of proportion. But just recently here, the FBI and the Justice Department had a nationwide raid, and hundreds of kids were recovered from these abduction sex rings. Like I said, this is prurient, but if the Kansas Secretary there for Children and Family Services thinks that, they're just wandering around, I mean, isn't there the possibility of these abductions occurring, and is there evidence of it? Maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion, making apples and oranges, apples and bananas.
Well, it is possible that there are abductions. It is possible that some of these kids are one of the concerns that was brought up is because many of them are young girls, is whether or not they are falling prey to human trafficking and those kind of concerns. Those are real.
Doesn't that tickle the right-wing lizard brain that would be, against that? Generally, I see people react to those kinds of stories, but here, when it's government oversight, that turns off that trigger or something. I'm trying to figure out.
I don't know because, the excuse is, the majority of them are running home to the parents that they know. That could be true, and it could be the majority, but that's a far stretch to say we know for certain that they all go home to an abusive parent.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily make it any better, by the way, that a kid who was removed from an abusive household or a troubled household goes back to the troubled household. I mean, that's not necessarily a good situation either. But the conclusion being reached that they all go there, so therefore who cares, is terrible because if out of that 77, let's say 10%, a small number, fall through the cracks another way, they run off and they are either homeless, they're in they've fallen prey to human trafficking, they're in legal trouble, anything. That's still 8 kids or so who are in real trouble, and that's too many. All of these kids are at risk. They run off. The other thing that's happening is they are not getting proper education. None of these. There is a societal interest in making sure you do the right thing here, because small money spent right now up front, to provide these kids with opportunities early prevents you from long-term spending to take care of the problems that happen if they don't have those things. This is the part that baffles me with the Republicans. They'll talk about government needs to save money, save money, save money. Well, sometimes you save money by spending just a little bit. I use this example to people. I went out when we rebuilt our house, and I bought a high-efficiency, furnace. And people will say, well, why did you spend more money for a high-efficiency furnace and air conditioner? Because every month I spend less money on keeping the thing running. Over the course of 10 years, the thing paid for itself. It more than paid for itself. Republicans plan here is as though they want to spend the absolute least, by the absolute most terrible option. They'll pellet heat their house, and they'll put up tons of fans and window units for air in the summer. And then they want to complain about the long-term cost of that. Well, you can't have it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to spend a little to save a lot. And in the case of these kids, they're deciding to be incredibly cheap and damn the long-term consequences. And the long-term consequences are going to be paid by people who are here long after they're out of office. And frankly, the moral consequence of knowing that you did the very least you could while kids were forced into terrible situations, or some kids were murdered due to abuse, is the kind of thing that would make it very hard for me to sleep at night. There's occasionally going to be something terrible that happens, and that would make me feel bad. But if I knew that I didn't do absolutely everything I could to minimize those chances, I got to tell you, morally, that would be sickening to me.
Well, let's speak also about another moral issue, not on the list that I gave you this morning. We'll get to the DNC stories here real quickly, but I want to have you speak about Betsy DeVos rescinding or pulling back the 17 regulations on disabled students. I mean, there's a big moral issue there. This is being done to sort of streamline inefficiencies, but apparently she doesn't know disability law.
No, not only does she not know disability law, but this is a giant smack in the face of parents and advocates who have worked decades to try and get their kids fair shake. And as a moral, forget the money, forget all of this. We are setting up a government to pick on poor, physically and mentally disabled children. And because we think that that's okay. When I was young, they installed an elevator in the high school near our home, which was to assist several students. But yes, most definitely my wheelchair-bound brother was one of them. And someone came to our house and said, oh, if he didn't have to go to school here, we wouldn't spend this money. That's the wrong way to look at this. Either we are a society that believes that there are some expenses we have because they are moral and just, or we are just deciding that some people are worth less. And I got to tell you, if people are part of the anti-choice, supposed pro-life movement, and they are on the side of limiting the quality of life of millions of Americans, and by telling them that their life is worth less, then that is not, any sort of pro-life viewpoint. And what Betsy DeVos is doing is an absolute attempt to devalue and demean millions of Americans, and it's sickening.
I've heard, there's a lot of deep philosophical discussions we could have to try to deconstruct how this mindset or belief is being manifested by these personages. But
it's part of it. A big part of it is because too many people who don't know or love someone with a disability, or don't think that they do, think that disabilities happen to people who have it coming, that there's some level of karma.
Yes, that's what
don't have this happen to them. Right. And as a result, it's easy for them to bash people who are disabled, physically or mentally disabled. And whether they say it outright or not, that is part of the thinking, and it is sick.
Well, I, being in Berkeley for so long, the Center for Independent Living, began there, and the idea of, American Disabilities Act and access and all of that was so much a part of everything that we worked for. But I'll just say I've always been blessed for being very healthy and athletic. But I got to tell you, when I got a little bit older and I would try to get to the bus and I couldn't run to the bus because it was pulling away. God, even though I was supposedly empathetic to what others of lesser physicality had to go through, boy, it really pissed me off. It seems so discriminatory. and people people don't get it. They think it only happens to other people, and then you put on this, I don't know, I don't want to keep beating up on Leviticus, but that there's some evil reason why you're afflicted so, and that to me is that bugs me the most. But let's get to the recap on the DNC. But first, put the lie, or explain how this fake news came out about a conversation that was overheard that you were a part of.
I was a part of it. So there was a meeting at the DNC that involved several state party chairs, activists who are also members of the DNC, and several executive committee members, including members of the Unity Reform Commission and Bernie staff and those kind of things. But also a mix of other people, including some people who were Hillary delegates, whatever, where younger people who weren't familiar with the rules and concerns of the DNC were asking questions. Well, one of the questions came up where they asked about, someone asked a question. I couldn't hear all of it. I couldn't hear how it all started. But somebody asked questions about they were unhappy with Tom Perez's slate. They wanted to propose either an alternate slate or do these kind of things, other things. And we walked them through the rules of why that's not the way the process worked, and you couldn't do it this way. And here was another way that, here are things that could be done, and here are things, there were elections throughout the week, and urged more people to run for positions on these committees, and because several of the councils and caucuses all had elections, please run for them, those kind of things. But amidst the discussion was, of course, amongst several of the general unhappiness with Donna Brazile, because several of the Bernie people have that concern. I will be blunt here. I do not have the same concern that they do. But that's, even though I am a Bernie person, I'm not wound up to the point where I'm going to go after what is basically an emeritus, role. Donna is not showing up and taking meetings at all these things. So it's kind of like arguing with a ghost as far as I'm concerned. Right. But that conversation was overheard by someone else who was nearby, who thought that members, state party chairs, and Unity Reform members were urging the removal of several black women from the executive committee or from the at-large. Well, that didn't happen. That was not the discussion at all. In fact, the people at that table were just explaining the rules of how things could go. And I said, look, this really complicates things if, we're not going to be able to respond to new members for fear of being overheard and taken wildly out of context, in the sense that it makes it where it's possible for people to blame anybody. There are times where I and others have had to explain rules and guidelines to people, and some of them may be uncomfortable conversations. We've had to explain, in the past why certain procedures happen the way they do, and so on and so on. And some of those conversations can be uncomfortable, but they're the subjects that some members want to talk about. And unless we're given enough free ground to explain the process to those people, we're at risk of just having tons of people uninformed and they don't know. Hold on 1 second. Yep. But that conversation, because it was overheard, started a rumor, and the rumor was picked up on BuzzFeed. The rumor was picked up on Vanity Fair. The rumor was everywhere about how there was a plot to overthrow these women from the DNC committee, and it just didn't happen. That was
on
not
social media.
The nature of the conversation. Yeah, social media was all over it, and it was just one where I was like, we're now spreading fake news to promote division between two different groups, which it just didn't happen that way.
Right. So as a recap, there is not a purge.
Well, okay, so the purge is a different subject. The purge is where people were unhappy with several people being removed from committees and executive slots.
Right.
Now, there were people removed from executive committee slots, and that is still something we're debating. It's something I'm privately not as happy with. But it's very hard for me to say, oh, this is a purge, when at the same time, so many people found themselves in new committee slots, new members who are, new on councils, on executive committee positions, and so on. And so when you say, hey, we're going to purge something, it's as though you wipe out a viewpoint. And when I look at it, like, that viewpoint also picked up a lot of slots across councils, committees, and caucuses all over, through the weekend. It was just one where some of the people that everybody knew as firm advocates of one position are no longer there, and now new people are. How does that work out? Well, we're not really going to know until probably after the next two meetings, and then we'll have a pretty good idea of, how this all shook out. But
in the couple of minutes that we have left, we're deep into our buffer period. But can you quickly tell us about the new working group that's been organized?
So there was the formation of what's called a reform working group. Actually, there were several working groups formed over the week, and I think this is a good way to look at changing and implementing new structures within the Democratic Party. Working groups are groups of 10 to 20 people who are focused on specific issues and proposals that they want to bring before the DNC at the upcoming meeting. I am part of a group that's calling itself the Reform Working Group. So the Reform Working Group is looking at internal policies. So we're not talking about policies of the party like we stand on Keystone or anything like that, but internal policies within the party that have just developed over the years that we think need to be reevaluated or changed in order to help modernize the party, in order to bring either transparency or to promote a better opportunity to win. And in that group, we have at least 4 state party chairs. We have members who are both at large and elected. We have members who are strong Hillary advocates and strong Bernie advocates. We're just looking through the policies of the DNC and saying, hey, these are the kind of things that, this is stuck, this rules or guidelines has existed for 20 years plus. Maybe it needs to be modernized to reflect, the fact that it's, 2020 instead of the 1980s. And so some of these things are going to have to do with how we handle committees, communications, how we address transparency. And I'm really excited to look at this because I think it's a chance to, the Unity Reform Commission is looking big ticket items that they want to put policy-wise. Think of these as the technical small balls, but the real important stuff that can help a lot of people who are on the outside who want to shake their fists at the Democratic Party go, oh, okay, I see that they're doing this now, and this is how they got there. And I think the more of this kind of work we can do, the more we bring in some of the people who, are unhappy right now, but can look at this and say, hey, these are some good options. These are some things that they're working on.
Sounds exciting, and we'll speak about it some more next week when we visit with you next Tuesday. So thanks for today, Chris.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, folks, we got Hartman coming up really quick here, 6 minutes after the hour. We'll get a little bit of the Charmel's Dear Uncle Sam in before that happens. And stay tuned to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365. And why? Well, because who loves you, baby? Okay, Wink, I will see you on the other side.
All right. Rope.